On.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dina.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me here today.
I'm going to welcome everyone and give us an overview before we get started. I want to welcome everybody who came, and hopefully we'll have more people joining us. I'm Dina Samfield. I'm the chair of the Shirley Democratic Town Committee. And I'm really happy that you could join us for this meeting with our 37th Middlesex District State Representative, Dan Sena, and one of his interns, Shirley's own Olivia Oestreicher. I first want to ask you, if you haven't already, to please mute yourselves for now by moving your mouse to the lower left corner of the Zoom call window and click the mute button. I also want to let you know that this is being recorded for later broadcasts. So if you wish to speak later, but you're camera shy, then you can go down to that lower left corner and click on stop video so that your image isn't there. I'm going to give the agenda after I introduce our speakers. Representative Sena is going to talk a little about himself and his legislative priorities, what's happening across our district. And Olivia is going to tell us a bit about what it's like to serve as an intern and about her plans for the future. And then we'll open things up for questions and an answer session, which we will end at least by 8:30, probably sooner. If you want to ask questions, you can type them in the chat, or you can go to participants at the bottom of the screen and then look at the list of participants. And at the bottom, there's a little raise hand image, and you can click on that. We're going to try to keep track of people who have questions in order, and hopefully we will get everybody who wants to ask a question. We will get your questions answered. And I want to tell you a little bit about the Shirley Democratic Town Committee. We're there to support local, state, and federal Democratic candidates running for elected office and to promote the platform of the Democratic Party. The Shirley Democratic Town Committee is dedicated to economic and social justice, fair taxation and responsible spending, environmental protection, affordable health care for all, government, corporate, and individual responsibility. And you need not be a member to join any of our meetings. Our next one is scheduled for Tuesday, June 29th at 7 p.m. We'll be meeting in the Shirley Town offices in the meeting room AB, which is where the select board meets. And there will be a virtual option for people to join us. And this meeting is our caucus to select delegates to the Massachusetts Democratic Platform Convention in September. And you do not have to be a member of the committee in order to become a delegate. So we're hoping people will join us there, and you can learn more about our Democratic Town Committee by going to our Facebook page, which is at DTC Shirley, and there are links to our website and our email, our Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube channel. So with all of that, I want to thank you again for coming. I want to introduce Dan Sena. Thank you so much for joining us. Representative Sena is the member of the Massachusetts House of Representatives from the 37th Middlesex District. The district includes parts of Acton, Ayer, and Lunenburg, and it's all of Shirley, Boxborough, and Harvard. He was elected at a special election on June 2nd last year. And before his election, Dan served as Senator Jamie Eldridge's district director for 6 years, working to protect immigrant rights, ensure healthcare access, and make progress towards racial justice and climate justice. And I was going to list your committees, but I'm going to let you do that if you'd like to, Dan. And also joining us is his intern, Olivia Oestreicher of Shirley. Olivia is a graduating senior at the Ayer Shirley Regional High School. At the high school, Olivia participates in first robotics, the first robotics team, Special Olympics, unified sports, basketball, jazz band, marching band, concert choir, drama club, mock trial, the Gay Straight Alliance, student council, and the National Honor Society. As an intern for Representative Sena, she conceptualized and helped write House Bill 700, the robotics grant bill, which she will tell you more about. After high school, Olivia will be attending Northeastern University, majoring in business administration and political science. Olivia hopes to run a national voter education organization focused on youth voter registration and then be the governor of Massachusetts. And no, she's not kidding. So with that, I would like to turn things over to Dan. If you joined late, if you could mute yourselves, I would appreciate it. I'm not sure if the video is going to show the speaker if you're not muted and you're speaking or making some noise. So I just want to remind you to mute yourselves. And I want to turn things over to Dan Sena.
Good evening, everyone. Dina Samfield, thank you so much for the invitation to come and speak at the Shirley DTC. It has been an honor so far to be able to serve the 37th Middlesex District for the past almost a year now, into almost going through a pandemic and finding ways that we can work around it so we can serve our constituents and support the economy and making sure government is still running during COVID. But I want to highlight a few bills that I still remember as of today. The police reform bill, for example, we were able to pass last year, which had a lot of provisions that would make law enforcement accountable, and also we voted on a climate change bill that would lead to net zero by the year of 2050, which that was another exciting legislation we were able to vote and approve on. On the committee front, I have four committees that I was basically assigned to. One of them, which I'm very excited to be in, which is the Education Committee. And Dina mentioned a little bit about the efforts we have had with my intern Olivia here to file a robotics bill that would really bring revenue from the state to support elementary, middle, and high school with robotics and STEM education. So we're looking at not only just the robotics aspect, but looking at the overall science and the technology field. So that's exciting front. And we have over 30 co-sponsors, and that's a great advocacy on our part. And by that, I actually want to thank Olivia as well, because she's working so hard to get this bill out to the public as much as we know. And I had the honor to meet the school in Shirley to see the students who are really creating all this, and it's making a change at the state level. Another committee I was assigned to was the Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure, sure, which that's something that I am learning so much about, because it deals with liquor licenses and the process to go and request. We're actually working to help a business in Lunenburg obtain a liquor license. So we filed legislation on that individual for that small business. The other committee was Public Safety and Homeland Security, which we haven't had. I don't think we have had a hearing yet, but we are working to have some bills heard there fairly soon. And lastly, it was the consumer. It was actually cybersecurity. It was like it's advanced IT and internet and cybersecurity. So that would be, I think, new to me. I'd probably be able to learn a lot of things related to cybersecurity. It's not my expertise, but looking at the overall, when we're dealing with the budget that we passed this time around, we were able to actually provide some funds for, I actually filed one amendment per town, but we were able to get some funds for the Acton Playground, the Garden Field Playground. They're really trying to renovate for many years and getting donations from the local business. And I'm glad that the state will be able to provide some assistance when it comes to that. But also with the Asian American studies, we actually were able to increase $300,000 on the budget process. So that was great to see. Also, the film tax industry, we were able to pass that would allow for more investment. And I met with so many individuals that benefit directly from that. Not only people that work in the studio, but really the setup and the lighting. So it really brings a lot of jobs to our area. But with that, I was also able to file a legislation with universal pre-K that would allow for parents to be able to bring their child to a kind of free school for their pre-K students from 2 years and 9 months all the way to 5 years. And that's really something we need to work on to get it passed. I think it would really benefit the families in Massachusetts in general. When I was canvassing, I met with families who felt that these was something that was a top priority for them. And we're making progress. There is another bill at the state level that would address pre-K from 0 to 5, which I'm also co-sponsoring that piece of legislation. And housing, we have a housing crisis. We have worked with the state to try to, in towns at the local level, to get funding from the state. For example, sometimes there's a grant that they can apply that would help them build the sewer project, and then some private, construction would take place for public housing or so. So that has been something great to see, and we need more housing as much as we can, and affordable housing, because when we now, after the pandemic, we see the cost of housing has really just skyrocketed, and that's something we need to address. And lastly, I want to say something about transportation, and I really hope that we can upgrade our MBTA and connect the north and south link. That's really something in the broad aspect, and would like to see more funding, more public funding going towards transportation. And one way to pay for it is really passing the millionaire's tax. We can use those funds to, maybe half of it could go to transportation, the half towards a pre-K program, and I think would be beneficial that we can address that. And so with that, I would open the floor, Dina, for some questions. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak and give you some of my work, and also Dan Zatella, my aide that I call my chief of staff, my almost everything that I do in the office runs by Dan as well. So it's been terrific to work with. Every call and email we receive, we're very responsive, and he actually keeps tracks of all of the constituent inquiries we've had so far. And actually, Dan has a really nice chart that I usually refer to when I talk about, with high school students. I talk about, some of the work that I do. And he puts a chart that would say, okay, we have received, 800 emails. And from that, there's a breakdown of each individual issue that that person was advocating for example, immigration, education, health inquiry, a variety of topics. And it's really great to see, because that's how we get the public opinion when we are dealing with issues that we want to be debating and looking at priorities and how can we address those. And I think those data is also very, very helpful to me. And I encourage everyone here to, email my office, call. You're here to be heard, and I really want to make sure that my constituents feel that way. So with that, thank you.
So I'd like to ask the question, what is your email?
It's Danillo.Sena at mahouse.gov, and that's DANILLO.SENA at mahouse.gov. And
thank you to your aide, Dan, for putting that in the chat as well. We appreciate that. And I want to just hog the floor for a second to ask one more question, which is, it seems to me that you are actually paying attention to the emails that you are getting. And I'm wondering if you would are you encouraging people to email their representatives, even if they know their representative supports something? Should they still go ahead and send them an email? Will it make a difference?
Absolutely, because when we are debating legislation, and we can, if it's something that is public and they don't mind sharing their story, sometimes that's personal, but we have that information and we can really advocate on their behalf. And with, for example, there's some legislation that we're looking into it in regards to healthcare. A family reached out to me. My son has this condition. There's this bill. Can you support? Can you advocate for this bill? And that's just one ways that we can be effective and support in terms of legislation. But on the constituent side, Dan has helped hundreds, I would say, with unemployment cases, especially during the COVID time. So it has its purposes, not only for the constituent aspect of assistance that is needed from the state, but also advocating for legislation.
And so can people also call your office?
Yeah, so can call or email. And Dan, can you also put the phone number in the chat as well for folks to retrieve that? We are on room 39, which I don't think the State House is open yet for the public, but hopefully will be soon. And that's where we are located. We have several interns that help us with everyday tasks. And during the summer, we are getting more interns as well. And usually I try to look for students or interns that are in the district that are really kind of high school or college students that have an interest in either history, social studies, government, really any area of interest.
So before we introduce Olivia to speak, what other questions do people have? I want to open it up to people. I see Joyce has her hand raised. Joyce?
I hope my microphone's working. I apologize. Last night my camera was working. Tonight it's not. So what the hell. Anyway, thank you very much, Dan. And you mentioned housing. And I think the problem is if you could comment on the housing that we're putting in Shirley right now, which I hear anything from 42 to 46. So I'm not sure what the number is. But I would think with the cost of building and everything right now, how do you think that's going to go? And again, I apologize for not having my camera.
Yeah, no, great question, Joyce. Great question. I mean, it's a supply and demand, how I look at it in terms of the housing cost or housing. We need to certainly find ways that we're building more houses. And at the same time, protecting the environment. It's a balance. And when it comes to the local level, local decisions, it's tough. Some people are for it, some people are against it, but we really need to keep this discussions in mind, because how are we going to be able to afford housing if we're not addressing it? And we are living in a housing crisis right now. There are several legislation things that I've seen that they have filed at the State House that would address housing production legislation, for example. I try to, here at the local level, join some of those housing meetings, Housing for All, for example, to really kind of see where we are at the local level and what can we do at the state to support municipalities to take advantage of any either grants or hopefully meaningful legislation that we can address.
Joyce, did you want to add anything?
No, I just said thank you. It's going to be a long time coming. When I just heard lumber went up 300%. So.
I had a meeting with some steel workers this morning, but they said that it's slightly going down now, but hopefully we'll see that those numbers decreasing. The cost of lumber or so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, cost of everything in the trades.
I see a question from Kendra Krakowitz. She is asking in the chat, what topics do you get the most communications about from constituents?
Great question. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to find my chart, but one of them was immigration, believe it or not. It was like a civil rights was up there, education, healthcare. Those three seems to be one of the biggest, and I actually have the chart in front of me and I can't find it, but those seems to be actually I found it, here it is. Yeah, so it was like immigrant rights was like about 87%, climate change, police reform during that time was 82% of, usually, Row Act, about 66%. And then we had others with the film tax credit, MCAS, cancellation, public higher education funding, and animal welfare. So kind of it's a broad topics, but we really see where the constituencies care so much about the issues that they are advocating for. It's great that we actually able to keep a chart with that. And I even have the breakdown by towns, but I'm not going to go there because.
Brian, our moderator, do you know whose hand was raised next?
It looks like someone named Finn had a hand raised, so maybe Finn and then Emma.
Yes, thank you. Coincidentally, my question also is on housing. So we get to keep on going with that, I guess, which is convenient. Mine is specifically, I was wondering what you had to say on specifically zoning in regards to housing, and even deeper, more on what you had to say about the prevalence of R1 or single family zoning in, Massachusetts, the district, state, the country in general, just really what you think the impact that has on the housing environment in the district and the state and in general.
And Finn, are you saying with the zoning in terms of how many levels you can build a home or a building?
Sort of. I'm generally talking about just single family homes, which are, just specifically for units that are specifically for single families, whereas, with, certain upper levels, you could legally have more than one family in a similar size. So kind of, yeah.
Yeah. There's some public housing projects that are being designed. In Shirley, recently we had the Shirley Meadows, right? And here in Acton, there's basically a waiting period for a housing application, for example, if they're applying for housing, public housing. But they have at least now a project that was actually approved that they are going to be building more, apartment or condominium complex for more housing. And that discussion usually at the local level kind of becomes, an issue that you have two sides of the argument. One saying, oh yes, we're more for more housing, and the other saying, no, we need to protect the environment, or we can't, So those are more like discussions that, on the local level when it comes to, housing. But we need to address at the state level to really push for more funding for the towns to be able to build more houses. And I actually just attended one with the lieutenant governor came. There was a grant, I think it was $2.2 million for a sewer project that would basically, there's 240 units, I believe. Correct if I'm wrong then. But out of those 240 units, there was 40 or 39 of them would be 40B units. So basically kind of really helping individuals from all sorts of income levels, from low to even higher, be able to afford, a home. I'm not sure if I answered your question in regards to the zoning. That's something I would probably have to review a little further. But I am certainly hoping that we can, look at creative ways that we can build more homes. And it's an issue. Every town right now, it's being impacted by it. And I do think that the governor has made this some kind of I don't want to say a priority, but has made a way that towns can apply for this kind of grant that have been indicated. And I think we just need to see more of that, and hoping that we can at least minimize the crisis, right? We might not fix it right away, but at least try to put a break on the housing front.
Emma? Is Emma there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think it's not gonna let me do camera, but only the people who know me know what I look like. But I actually had a comment about housing too, or more of a curiosity. I wouldn't say this is like a hot topic for me, but one of the things that strikes me and you just actually referenced it, is how that these are maybe local town concerns in terms of zoning versus something that could be more broadly handled on a state level. And I feel like there are regulations that potentially an individual in your position could have influence on that would radically change dynamics with housing. And it's something along the lines of something like, to parallel it, like when we talk about class inequities and inequities in terms of wealth disparity, we often recognize that, someone that lives in a town like Harvard, where the property taxes are higher, are going to benefit from really strong public education. So it's that there's a direct correlation between education and wealth inequity. So similarly, when I look at housing issues, one of the things that I find to be a real driving factor is how houses are appraised, that the numbers, like the amount of square footage and number of bedrooms, et cetera, and that therefore makes it incentivized for builders to need to build larger houses in order to get the return on investment that is required. And when you look at the building costs, et cetera, that adversely affects two key elements that I know are of concern in this area, which is environmentally, there's no incentive to build small, environmentally efficient homes because there's not going to be a return on the revenue for that. And then it also disincentivizes our old aging population in these towns from moving because they're not going to get a return on investment if they need to downsize. So it becomes really prohibitive in terms of some of these density housing issues, just by simple nature of how we appraise homes and assess them. We are inhibiting trying to drive change where, and we could have more environmentally sound houses, and we could address the need for more small units that would help diversify the populations in these towns and help older populations be able to stay in these towns. And that's something I wonder if on a legislative level ever comes up. I mean, grants are great and stuff, but it's more of, seems like band-aid solutions to something that is a systemic problem and isn't going to go away anytime soon. Are there any kind of broad approaches that are changing how we regulate these things that might have some positive impacts on housing?
Thank you. Great question. And I think you basically laid out the issues that we have when it comes to housing for the most part. And in terms of legislation, I would probably have to look what kinds of legislations were filed by my colleagues with dealing with housing. I know there was a housing production bill, and I would actually want to look at it and see if that was filed again. And I'll just give you one kind of example as to why we are in a crisis as well. There was a home for sale here in Acton, and I knew the owners. I spoke with them. They received like 28 offers for that home, and they were asking for a certain amount, and they got way more. And the competition is just crazy. And I think it's maybe people moving out of Boston away from the cities, but it just one example of the supply and demand issue that we are facing with. And we need to make it sure that it's affordable for everybody. So I know that there was a state law that they passed that about 10% needs to be affordable. That's great, and I think a lot of towns are about that, or some towns a little over the regulation, what the regulations asked for. But that's one way that we can be certainly effective. But if you have any legislation ideas, I would be glad to look at it and see if we can file a bill on it. But right now, what I can do is I can look at all the other housing bills that has been filed, and how can we address that and target those issues, at least for the time being.
Did you want to add anything, Emma?
No, not necessarily. That's it's an observation that I have had for some time, and it's something like, and I see some of these kinds of problems that we know are large and looming, and then trying to try to assess like how these broad topics like housing in Massachusetts impacts these are very specific local demographics, and how legislation could be leveraged to make changes that to things that are more like, about the system. In my mind, the system here is there's no way that we're going to get more density and more energy, like, and more environmentally sound houses and more elderly community housing and diverse population housing in these communities if we don't change how appraisals are done, because there's no incentive for builders to do it. I mean, I see this come up a lot in Harvard, even with our recent kind of town meeting discussions. It's like, we're going to put all these restrictions on this thing and then it's going to happen the way we want. And in my experience, the way to drive change is to create incentives that, cultivate the kind of outcome you're looking for. And that's something where I think regulations and legislation can have positive impact. So looking at something like, how do we create incentives for builders to, in terms of appraised values or return, how do we influence that in such a way that long-term these things that we know we need in these communities start to develop, because we already see the deficits. And yeah, I don't know the answer to that, but that's something I think legislation has the power to do. And I'm happy to have that conversation with anybody if any of my experience in this insight trigger something for someone, we can come up with like a genius idea that solves all these problems.
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you, Emma.
Brian, did you want to tack on to that?
Yeah, actually, it's a very relevant question. So, Dan, thank you for joining us tonight. And it sounds like if there's one theme of the night so far, it's perhaps the unsurprising tension between the housing crisis and also a lot of the values that so many people move to this area for, which is kind of the rural character and natural sort of resource values. I also serve on the Shirley Greenway Committee, and our charge is implementing the open space plan for the town, which the will of the people of Shirley says open space and natural resource protection is really important. So how do we achieve this at the same time we have this kind of high demand for housing? And so I guess it's a question as well as a suggestion in response to your question, is how to balance housing and environmental kind of conservation needs, because they're both important goals. And might there be some state assistance that could help by incentivizing both at the same time? So if there's efforts to expand a need for affordable housing, might there be ways to marry up the need for affordable housing with the town's ability to accept affordable housing, but at the same time create similar incentives for conservation at the same time? So perhaps as Shirley is accepting some affordable housing properties, might Shirley then benefit from some state assistance that we can now use to protect lands elsewhere in town that might be more suitable for conservation? So there may be some mechanisms like that marry up the two issues together. I don't have the answers, but if you take anything from at least this conversation with folks in Shirley tonight, I hope you hear that there's a very strong interest in environmental conservation and support from the state to continue to do that. And at the same time, there's great concern about the need for housing. And at the same time, there's concern about the coming crush as it moves west from Boston, and what that might mean for a town that's under-resourced to handle these issues. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on the theme or the solutions, but it's certainly a concern.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for that question. And that's something sometimes we discuss every day, and like, okay, what's the balance, right, between construction and protecting the environment? The climate change bill that we passed, which would make us net zero by the year 2050, it's an incremental bill, right? So by, for example, 2030, be 50%, to 75%, and then by 85%, and hopefully achieving that incrementally. One ways that we can go about it is I actually just went to the Douglas Elementary School in Gates that they're building here that would serve residents from Acton and Boxborough. They were able to build their school in a way that it's they basically are able to provide their own electricity with solar and other ways. And it was actually that there was three material. It was not only the material that they used, but they were able to basically get their own water and provide their own energy. And I think that's really maybe what the future is going to entail. I think we really need to look when we are building new buildings that it needs to be friendly, environmentally friendly. That would, really kind of looking at that for the future, right? Because we want to make sure we have a Earth that is still breathing. And so maybe I'm not sure if I answered your question, but there's ways that we can try to address both and still be environmentally friendly. So
I see 3 hands raised, and I'm going to take 2 and then maybe turn it over to Olivia for a little while, and then we can continue with the questions if that's okay. Someone who has their hand raised that's known as Zoom user is next, I believe. I'm not sure if they're still there. Okay, let's go on to Kendra.
Hi, this was piggybacking on a comment that Emma made in her question about housing, which was that connection between, wealth inequity and educational inequity, which this has always struck me as a big problem with how education is funded largely out of local property taxes, which, we end up with this systemic, perpetuating this systemic problem. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on that. And have there ever been talks of reforming this education funding at the state level?
Kendra, thank you for your question. I think you're looking outside of the box. Why we're doing things this way, and why we're not looking for a way that it's more, in a way, fair for every city and town. One way, when we talk about healthcare, it's like Medicare for all, right? We want to make sure there's a free a system that we can basically go get your medication and go get your without much deductible. So like looking inside of education, what can we do? I mean, one way is, providing a kindergarten education that is free of charge, that would also be paid by the state or even local towns too, who knows, but being able to elaborate that, because the cost right now is very high. And if we're educating the children early on, eventually we're going to be able to get that return in the future. Now, in terms of your question, in terms of funding, that formula they have recently changed. A couple of years ago, it passed by the legislature, was signed by the governor, and what would do, it would allow for towns that are less disadvantaged, if I may say, to be able to receive some extra support. So it was looking at some education equity to basically address some of your concerns with your question. I don't think it certainly is going to solve the problem we have, but I think it's going to at least try to make it more just. But I agree with you. I think the way we have right now is certainly not fair, because right now a lot of it comes from property tax or local revenues, right? And but really looking for ways that we can make the system more just. One way, that's why people are advocating to kind of cancel or the MCAS, for example. It's like students were not going to school, and maybe a lot was learning remote, and now they're asked to be take an exam on it, and that's when you're going to see the gaps, where the inequalities are. And so that's, for example, we have free lunch now for everyone because of COVID. I think that really should continue. So students can, not worried about, if they're going to have something to eat in school, and the cost that for the parents, for example, with, there's other bills that they have to take care of. So that's something would be nice. And there's a bill on it that I've co-sponsored to make that a reality. And I'm really hoping that we can get that done.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a Zoom user again to see if you can ask your question. Can you hear me?
I don't know if you're talking about me.
I am. Oh, it's Tenny. I see
don't know
your
why,
name is
I don't know why
Zoom
you keep
user.
saying Zoom user. My name not up there, or?
Your name's not up there. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
Okay, okay. This has nothing to do with COVID, but I'm elderly and I've got a beautiful home and I need to downsize. So I've been looking for 3 years and it's just ridiculous. It's like, why should I get rid of my home and pay the exact same price for a condo in the area or even more? That's what's going on. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only person going through this.
Mm-hmm.
And something that would be a nice project around here, if we did have a chunk of land that was maybe 20 acres or something like that, would be like a resident owner community of modular homes. There are these places that means that, basically it's like a glorified trailer park that's been turned into modular homes and people own shares. It is a co-op is what it amounts to. That would allow somebody like me to downsize from 1,900 to 1,000 square feet and have still a small patch of land for, a backyard and privacy. These places exist up in New Hampshire. They exist, there's a couple of them down in Plymouth County, right around Plymouth itself. I've already checked a few of them out. But man, if you need to downsize around here, there is not much at all available for any of us. We are here around our friends, our family, and our doctors, and we're going to have to move and change all of that. And, it's not good. Some of us just aren't really made for condos anyway. I'm one of those people. But I'm just saying they're called resident owner communities, and they basically are co-ops, just like an apartment building in Manhattan. Everybody owns a share. One of them, the share was $30,000. So, all the way around, it was worth it. But I'm just saying there is, if you're older around here, there is just nowhere to go, except, if you got kids, you put a in-law apartment on their house. I'm just talking about the whole area. It's really weird.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. I'm
right.
sorry, what's your name again?
Tenny Comar.
Penny, nice to see you, Penny. Thank you.
8910. Yeah, I mean, seeing that big development with the farm over in Littleton on 2A, that they built a year or so ago, and the houses in air, it's just what the previous person was talking about. Builders are only incentive, their only incentive is to build 2,500 square feet houses. And I've been here for 15 years, and when I had to scramble to find this place, this was actually the smallest house I could find at the time in 2005, and it's 1,900 square feet. And I'm by myself. I sure don't need this, but there's nowhere for me to go. So what are you going to do?
And
Why
Tenny
should I
is
go with this?
early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Tenny. I'd like to turn things over for a moment to Olivia.
Dina, it looks like Robert had a question. I'm not sure if it's a quick question or if it's a long question. Robert, why don't you?
Okay, thank you. I haven't figured out how to make the hand go up for raising my hand, so I put my real hand up. But I had a couple of quick comments. My uncle owns a couple of acres across the street from me, but it's visible from planes and helicopters. They have been harassed by developers to sell them that. And they want to pay the lowest they can pay for that. And then they're going to turn around and build, you know, like 4 houses on there and charge, you know, $500,000 a piece for them.
More.
That's a comment. Another observation I had is my daughter owned a 582 square foot condo in Air and sold it for enough to buy a comparable house in Leominster recently. Her mortgage, taxes, gas, electric, and water were less than $550 a month. The person who bought it from them, instead of moving in there, is leasing it for $1,200 a month. You know, this takes affordable out of the market and makes it unaffordable. And my question was, though, is, and you probably heard this dozens of times, the formula they use to calculate what's affordable and unaffordable is ludicrous, because in Shirley, you can't move out of your house into elderly housing. There's not enough of it. And the new stuff they built on Devon's, they want $1,200 an apartment for. Who can afford to, especially if it's somebody that's got their mortgage paid up, how can they afford to move out and go into some place like that? You know, no wonder some of them show up and vote against anything that raises their taxes at the town meeting. You know. Anyway, that's my
Yeah.
and
No, thank you. And I understand where you're coming from. I've know people who wants to be able to apply for, be able to buy a 40B for example, and they're slightly over, and then they don't are not eligible for it. And so I think that's a discussion we need to have to kind of, I don't know, look at that formula again and make sure that it's fair, because it's sometimes you just have to be very poor to be eligible for something, right? Even when it comes to mass health, it's like you have to be extremely poor, but if you just make a little bit more, then you're no longer eligible. And for seniors who are on Social Security, fixed income, that makes a huge difference. So I think that's something we need to look at, and I appreciate that, Robert, because you're not alone. I think I know quite a several amount of people who have shared that same concern to me. So. And Dina, if you want to introduce Olivia, Olivia has been my intern, and I've been so lucky to have her as an intern, because she is she has so much energy and has the skills. Basically, she's self-motivated. She wants to do the work, and she works so well with Daniel. Daniel assigns her a task, and she's eager to work on them. So I on the personal level, I really just want to thank Olivia Oestreicher here for the work you have done, Olivia. You're really creating and making change, and I'm so glad that you're going to be majoring political science, or so to continue that. So really, thank you. But Dina, if you want to introduce her, I don't know if you have any written anything else to add.
I think you just did, and you did a great job. Olivia, will you tell us a little about yourself and how you decided to become an intern, what it's like, and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. Before I go, while everyone was talking about that, I'll just comment on that. Obviously I don't pay taxes. I'm 17. I live with my parents. I'm in high school. But being in the Air Shirley Regional School District, I lived in Air for the first 13 years of my life and then moved to Shirley. Just living in Shirley, I moved to the Apple Orchard Estates in Shirley, which is above LAW. I'm not sure how many houses there are, probably over 100, and me and my siblings are the only kids in the whole district who go to Air Shirley. All of the other people choice their kids out of this school. They pay lower taxes in Shirley and choice their kids out to Acton, Boxborough, Bromfield, Littleton, just higher range school districts, which is, as soon as we moved here, there's a ton of kids in this development, and they're all choicing their kids out, which is not helping our school district, and they're just kind of cheating their way out. So that's just my observation from living here. It is absolutely 100% affecting our education, specifically in Shirley. I don't know much about Air because I was so little when I was there, but regardless of that, I actually would like to not thank COVID, because it hasn't been fun, but one of the reasons that I was looking for an internship is because none of my activities were happening over the summer. I'm usually a busy bee. You heard the list of activities that I normally do. I worked at Trader Joe's in Acton. I worked there for 2 years. And that's all I was doing. Normally I'm doing a ton of stuff for robotics and my music stuff, but none of that was happening for COVID. I have a real interest and passion for politics. And I was actually I was interviewing a person who is going to Northeastern because I was interested in that school. And she had worked for Jamie Eldridge as an intern for many years and actually knew Dan Sena. And so I was thrilled because if I was going to do an internship, I would want to do it with someone who actually represents the town that I live in, especially as a high schooler. In college, it's a little different. You intern for whoever wants to take you. But as for high school, I was very interested in interning for the state representative or the state senator, which was either Dan Sena or Jamie Eldridge. And I was very excited to get placed with Dan Sena. Immediately, we started working. I was interested in the things that I am interested most in politics is women's rights and equality, and especially education. And that's what I focus on. I'm a kid in the system. I'm in public schools. I've always been in public schools. I'm going to college next year and my parents are taking on a ton of debt. It's just something that I'm interested because I'm in the system and I see it every day. And I see my teachers scrapping, like having to do second and third jobs every day just to live because they don't get paid anything. And so that's kind of what I focused on. I've been doing lots of different work. I'm very thankful for Daniel and Dan for giving me lots of different, kind of exposing me to lots of different facets of politics. I've gotten to do phone calls with constituents. I have gotten to write press releases. And one thing that really stood out to me was, I believe it was the Sandy Pond Schoolhouse in Air, which is the oldest building still standing in Air. And they were applying for, I believe it was a grant for restoration. And I actually got to help write that letter to the State Department that would help give them funding. And I love doing it because I actually know the place. Like I toured it as a second grader for a field trip. Like I know how important it is to the town of Air. I lived it. I know our town there are many, many people who would be devastated to see that place go. So I'm very interested in state government and local politics just because it's personal. People have a personal attachment to it. It's less disconnected and you can actually know people who are directly affected by the policies that you're making. The biggest thing that I've done for the internship was, and I said this earlier to some people who were on the meeting earlier, is I got to conceptualize a robotics bill. So for context, I've been on the high school robotics team at Air Shirley for 4 years since I was a freshman. It's a really quite incredible program. Teaches in our school district. It runs from kindergarten all the way to senior year. It started about 10 years ago, maybe I think it was 8 years ago. We added our first robotics program in the elementary school. I was in 4th grade and we've started adding programs. And now robotics runs 7 days a week in our school district. Yep, that's an Andromeda 1 shirt. That's the team that I'm on. It runs 7 days a week. We have about 25 elementary school teams. We have 3 middle school teams and 1 high school team. And that's for LAW, Page Hilltop, the middle school and the high school. We have very, very strong programs in all 3 of the schools in our district. As a kid in the system, once again, I can see that it has completely transformed our district. Even 5 years ago, we didn't have the AP classes and the higher level science and engineering technology classes that we offer. I'm taking a college level computer science course right now. That was not there 5 years ago. And it's due in part to the people on the robotics team advocating and really pressing teachers and administrators in our school district, to add these programs. We've had, I believe, 87% of all of the alumni from our robotics program have gone to college and majored in a STEM field. I know Dina's son, Dana, is a computer science major right now, so he's part of that statistic. I unfortunately am not, because I'm going into political science and business, but with this internship, I saw a need for state level funding for these types of programs. There are probably around 10 other states in the country that have state funding for, it's an organization called First Robotics, an organization called Vex Robotics, which is a competitor, and Science Olympiad is included in this bill. And schools, public and charter schools in Massachusetts with this bill would be able to apply to receive up to $18,000 a year, depending on the level and the program, to directly help fund their teams and run successful seasons of robotics. Robotics, you learn so much. You learn so much about STEM, but it's also soft skills. It's the cooperation, teamwork. You learn how to fail, you learn how to succeed, and it's really invaluable. There's no other program like it in our school. There's no class that you can take that kind of matches the energy that comes with having these sorts of teams. And I think the greatest part about this bill is that it specifically targets underserved and underrepresented communities in Massachusetts that don't have these functioning programs. So they will get priority funding if they apply. And that is, we found according to the statistics that we've found in all the data that First Robotics has done, there are huge disparities of where these teams are located, and that has to do entirely with funding. These teams are expensive, tools are expensive, machinery is expensive. It's expensive to run after-school programs. And the wealthier towns in Massachusetts, wealthier school districts have way more teams running than teams that are less funded in Massachusetts. So I'm proud that this bill will specifically help those school districts in Massachusetts, start their programs. And the thing is, we start with, what I say is we start with one. We start with one team at the elementary school. One team at the elementary school, you can have probably around 10 kids per team. Those kids in elementary school love it. They move up to middle school. And you keep the elementary school team, and then you add a middle school team for those kids. The kids love it in middle school, you add a high school team. And you build the STEM pipeline, and that's exactly what we've done in our school district. And now we have almost 30 teams running in our district. So all you need is one, and then your whole district flourishes. So I'm super excited that we've done that. It was filed in February. It has, I believe the latest I checked, it was 34 co-sponsors. And I honestly, excuse me, I'm stumbling over myself. The First Robotics team at Air Shirley, we've been sending hundreds of emails directly to all 200 legislators in Massachusetts. But what we've also been doing is targeting and contacting every single other First Robotics team of high schoolers in Massachusetts and asking them to reach out to their own legislators. Because as much as, legislators love hearing from high schoolers, they're not going to be as supportive of something if they are representing like Cambridge and I live in Air, like they don't care that I live in Air if they're representing Cambridge, but we contact the First Robotics team in Cambridge and have them reach out to their own state representative and state senator. And we've gotten really overwhelming support with that. We've really ignited a fire of high schoolers in STEM, learning about civic education, which is really invaluable. This is the first time a lot of students have even know or learn about who their state representatives are, and state senators too, which is really something that I'm extremely proud of, and glad to say that Dan Sena and his whole team has helped with. So I will stop rambling, but that is definitely the coolest part that I have been able to do in the past year.
So is there anything that we can do, Olivia, to help with that bill? I mean, it sounds to me like you've just got a wonderful group of, you've been reaching out to all these schools, and I believe this started maybe with the Mass First proposal or program through the robotics team. There wanted to get, I believe, an FLL, a First Lego League team in every single district in the state. And the stumbling block was to get them all is, like you say, it's some districts are way wealthier than other districts, and it takes money. What can we do to help you?
So what I would say is really right now, what we're doing is all advocacy. The bill has been filed, it can take up to 2 years for this to even get talked about in a committee. What I would do and what I would suggest is, if you have contacts, we have an entire spreadsheet of towns, like literally individual towns in Massachusetts that their representatives have not, don't know about this bill, have not co-sponsored it. No one has reached out to them about it. If you had contacts with, Democratic committees in those towns, what I would say, reach out to those Democratic committees, and they can reach out to their own legislators and talk about this bill. It's really all about advocacy right now.
Thank you, Olivia. Do other people have questions for Olivia? Besides asking her if she will come to our caucus and become a delegate to the state convention. You can be an add-on, I believe, as a teen. Joyce?
Thanks, Olivia. And I'm so upset that the people who live in the apple orchard aren't sending their kids to Air Shirley, since all they have to do is fall out of bed to be there. And a couple of the towns that you mentioned have very weak, and they're not poor towns, have very weak or no robotics teams when I ask people from other towns. And I think that's a little bit disgraceful. I can always pick on somebody else, right? I would address also to Dan that the MSBA right now is not very friendly to having big enough rooms and having enough of support on their building programs to make people want to put in the facilities that you need to do what we did. We gave the school district totally encouraged and gave the spaces for the robotics teams to be there. And then when they're building these new schools where the classrooms are too small, and they talk about which they've never done, reimbursing some of the grounds that you would like to do to make your school attractive and give other places for things to go. So I think the MSBA is really a stumbling block right now for looking for these things for the future. How they get them to change, I have no idea. But when you're describing smaller classrooms to replace the classrooms you have before they reimburse you, this doesn't lend itself to having a corner in that classroom where somebody can do their Legos. So I think this is something that's inherent in the system, and we need to start looking at stuff like that real fast. So I don't know if anybody else is saying this, but Olivia, what you're doing is great, and the program has been outstanding in Shirley. Hi, sweetheart, say hello. So thank you very much.
Want to say hi?
Sorry, went the wrong way.
Thank you, Joyce. Joyce is on the Air Shirley Regional School District School Committee. And I have a question here from Carrie, who is the chair of the Lunenburg Democratic Town Committee. Dan, do you know if Representative Kushmarek supports the bill?
Which bill?
The robotics bill?
I would have to look at the list, but
He is currently a sponsor.
Yes.
He is a co-sponsor.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he's on there.
All right, thank you. Kendra?
Yes, hi. Thank you for all that wonderful information, Olivia. There were two things I'm interested in. I'm a STEM person myself, computer science graduate, And I'm interested in what kind of gender balance you're currently seeing in the robotics programs. And, like the incredible shrinking pipeline in STEM, especially for females, is of concern to me. So I'm curious if you see that gender balance, get more unbalanced as you get older in the teams. And it looked like there's a shrinking pipeline in these teams, because I think you said there were 25 elementary, 3 in middle, and 1 in high school. So I'm just curious about your thoughts on that, the gender balance and like this shrinking pipeline, and how do we encourage that not to happen?
It's actually I apologize. The elementary school teams, you can only have up to 10 kids per team. So in the middle school team, you can have up to 20. In high school, you can have as many as you want. So there are actually still a ton of students, and it's actually, I believe, at least 10% of our school is on the robotics team at the high school. So it's one team, but it's huge. So it's not shrinking, but I should have explained that earlier because it definitely sounds like it. I am a strong believer that you need to see yourself in a position in order for you to like think that you can do it. And so women make up 1/3 of the robotics team, which is, what I will say is, I think there need to be more female mentors on the team. I think female students in our school need to see themselves as someone who's capable of being in a STEM environment. I have a mom who's a scientist. I always knew that I was capable of being in a STEM environment, but the vast majority of girls don't have that. And the vast majority of the mentors on our team are male, with the exception of our head coach and our assistant coach are female, which is fantastic. And they're both really incredible female role models. But I really think we do specifically make programs to make sure that there are an influx of girls into the program. We have a Just for Girls recruiting night, which is just the returning female girls on the team, target the basically freshmen and sophomores who are maybe new to the high school, specifically target girls to bring them in and just talk about what it is like to be a woman in a STEM environment. It's different. We are, it's not equal. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat that. And I think our robotics team does a much better job at it than a lot of schools, just because we do have the women mentors in leadership positions, and it is a priority for our team. But it's not perfect. The STEM industry in general is extremely male dominated. But I will say, I really think there needs to be a priority for making sure there are more female mentors, just so female students see themselves in those positions.
Yeah, and that early experience can be so critical in how you feel about whether or not you belong in that space. Like, it broke my heart when my daughter was probably maybe middle schoolish age and went to a summer camp and signed up. We had signed her up in advance for the robotics session. And she got there the first day and, there was one girl and 19 boys. And she was on a team with 2 boys who took over and ran the keyboard, and it was kind of like this really discouraging experience for her, right? She just felt completely out of place. And that kind of, set the tone for her not being so interested in doing that again. So I'm glad that, there are at least 30% girls. That's great, because, you feel there's some kind of critical mass at about 20 or 25%, I think, where below that, it's kind of always on your mind that you're in this big, severe minority situation. But once you get above that, I think it gets a little easier. So I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
I'm going to just echo what Brian has posted to say that our district is so lucky, Olivia, to have you fighting
Thank you.
for these key issues. And he asks, are you able to recruit other students who might follow in your footsteps of student leadership and advocacy at the state level?
So I actually talked about this with Dan the other day. I am graduating next week, which is exciting. There are multiple students on the robotics team specifically that are interested in really keeping up this work with the bill, which is really exciting. I think we have a really great history and social sciences department at our school. So I really think there is a large interest in politics. And especially, I know there's a huge interest in social justice in our school. And so I think there is a ever rising amount of students, at least in our school district, that are interested in like political internships and things like this. And I'm very happy that I had this opportunity, and I really hope other Air Shirley students, and especially ones on the robotics team for this bill, will have this opportunity. So I will also say, this is not specifically answering the question, but I think as a young person, I am pretty much blown away at the amount of political science majors or minors that there are at the schools that I've been applying to. It almost half of the people, at least in my school, are either majoring in something and double majoring in political science, minoring in political science, doing a concentration in political science. There is a huge amount of people interested in this industry, which I think is really fantastic and something that we need. People need to be more engaged, especially as young people. We can get taken advantage of very easily if we're not on our toes. So that was kind of off topic, but that's what I'll say. I'm excited to be in this generation.
Yeah, we had tried to get some students from the high school to come to co-moderate with us our last public meeting, where we had people who are volunteers with the town who are on different boards like the select board and the school committee. And I couldn't get through the teachers to the students. I sort of hit a brick wall there to get people involved, and I did get 2 student volunteers, one who's in the district and one who isn't. But we want to invite people, young people in our community, to come to our meetings, and it's really important to engage on the local level as well as the state level. And we'd love to have people more civically engaged with us. And, please come to our meetings. Our next meeting is our caucus. Anyone can come. We have youth add-ons. We have LGBTQ add-ons for delegates. So even if you're not elected as a delegate, because we are a very small community, so we only can have a few people go to the convention, but we can have many add-ons of people. So as far as I know right now, the convention will be in person in September, probably in Lowell. We don't have a date for it yet, but we just love to have people come, young people come and engage with the committee and help us with local issues, some of those issues brought up tonight, and then others such as the Teens for Change group is interested in working on social justice and racial justice. But I really want to thank you so much, Olivia, for joining us tonight. And Representative Sena, thank you for being so generous with your time. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Does anybody have any last question before we say good night? I don't see any hands. So I'm going to let you all go. We are recording this, and hopefully it will air on the local public access station. And
I think I see Elizabeth with trying to ask a question, I think.
Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate your looking out for me. Olivia, so one of the, you were awesome. Thank you so much for joining our team or coming here tonight and sharing with us your thoughts. I mean, that really hits home. The only other thing I wanted to add to what Dina was saying about your presence and about your young people's presence is that we need your ideas. We need your ideas about what you think needs to evolve in our community and in the state and on a federal level. So I hope you can join us again and bring your friends and bring your ideas.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for that. Dina, I just want to say thank you for the invitation. I'm so glad that I was able to participate here tonight. Hopefully we'll be able to get more feedback and more comments and greater dialogue moving forward with a variety of topics and issues. And I see housing is probably number one, at least from discussions tonight. But I should say thank you, and feel free to invite me again. I think probably hear my son here speaking. But with that, I really want to just say thank you everybody for the questions, and I look forward to seeing everyone soon.
Thank you
for
very much.
having me.
Dina, I think Bob had a question too.
Oh, one last question, Bob?
The first one's directed to Olivia. I have the club t-shirt because my grandson Caleb Kalaluka was in the robotics club.
Yeah, I'm very good friends with him.
Yeah. And my other comment is there are a lot of companies now that are hiring a lot of women to be programmers, if you know anybody that was in school that wanted to do that. But the way that they've handled that pay discrepancy between what the guys are getting and the girls are getting is there's a large discount reseller or retailer. And what they've done is they pulled down what they're offering the guys rather than offering the women to match what the guys were getting. And they're having trouble getting programmers in-house. And there's a defense manufacturer in Nashua, New Hampshire that's having the same problem. And instead of I was working for them for 2 years, but I was making $10 an hour less than I would have if I had held out for another job someplace else. But I'd rather take the 2 years of work. But what they did was they brought down what they were offering the guys rather than increase the pay for the women, so that they're matching the women's and men's pay now.
Yeah,
that's an observation.
I know my best friend Grace Audette. You might have heard about her in the Air Shirley Tracker. She's amazing. She set up the Panther Innovation Lab at the high school. She got her Eagle Scout. She's majoring in mechanical engineering at WPI next year. And what I know that WPI does is they specifically give female applicants more scholarship money. So they're more likely to go to that school where they will get more connections in the STEM field than another school that is not, as STEM priority focused as WPI is, which I think is great. I really, personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I wish we, as for recruiting and hiring and stuff, if there is someone who is more capable at a job, they should get the job, right? In my mind, it's like, if you have, a male applicant who is more qualified than a woman, obviously there are systems in place where that woman, educational barriers, housing barriers, the societal barriers, where that woman wouldn't be as qualified or be able to be as qualified. But if you are the exact same and have the same opportunities and the male person is more qualified, I personally have no issue with the male getting the job. I just don't think gender should be a thing at all. If the female is more qualified, she should get the job. That's my personal opinion on that front. I just don't think gender should, and obviously women should be prioritized in the educational facilities and recruiting. But as for the job, if someone's more qualified, they should get the job. That's my personal opinion. Some people disagree with me on that.
And to get equal pay.
Sorry, it's super dark in my room right now.
And to get equal pay for that job.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, exactly. And yeah, all of that stuff. I think they should be recruited at a higher level, just because there are so many, like I said earlier, women can't see themselves in these positions because there's no exposure to women. I mean, even at our elementary schools, the science teachers were male, right? As starting in elementary school, girls in our school district don't see themselves in STEM positions. There's like maybe 3 male elementary school teachers in Page Hilltop, and the ones that I had were science and math teachers. It's this whole system of women and little girls can't see themselves in these positions. They automatically associate science and math and technology with male. And that's an issue. That starts young. That starts at 5 years old. I was in kindergarten, I was seeing that. And like I said, I'm privileged to have a mother who's in that field. And so that wasn't as much of an issue as me, or for me, but for most of my friends, I mean, the vast majority, they're repulsed. The women are repulsed by computer science. They're repulsed by math. And it's not because they're not good at it. It's just because they haven't been exposed to it at all. They were, can't see themselves in those positions. They think they'd be miserable in them just because and honestly, they've never tried them, just because they, you know, this is kind of off topic too, but I think STEM, like these computer science classes, should be mandatory. Right now they're electives. Like my computer science class that I'm taking is an elective. And I think for the workforce that we're going into, it is so much more important, just in general, to have a computer science background right now than it is really to have physics, in my personal opinion. I'm a business major and I have to take 6 computer science classes, and data science classes, and all of these statistics driven classes. STEM should be more prioritized, not just at the high school, but throughout the entire school district. Once you get to high school and you start offering these computer science classes, kids have already made their mind up as to whether they think they're interested in it or like it. You got to start younger.
Absolutely, yes.
And I
So
think that
true.
has,
So true.
I think that has, they've begun to do that, at least at Page Hilltop. I know that there's computer education. It wasn't there when I was in elementary school, but I think it is now. And I think there's more emphasis on it, but you can't start in high school. You got to start young. I even found biases in myself. I automatically thought I was worse at math just because there's no reason. I just thought I was worse at math than some of my male friends in the class. So
Yeah.
I could go on this tangent for a long time, but yeah,
Thank you
I
for
think it needs to
sharing
start
that.
young.
That
Oh,
perspective,
absolutely.
because that is absolutely true. They used to have in the computer labs in the schools where the kids would just make little graphics and just do a little typing program. Hopefully things are moving along, and your robotics bill is certainly not going to hurt. Thank you so much for your advocacy. Thank you, Representative Sena, for your advocacy. And I want to thank you again for coming, and thank everybody for participating tonight. Really appreciate it. And we'll let you know when the link comes up and this airs, and we'll share it with everybody. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Dina. It's nice to see
Thank you,
everybody.
Dana. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dan.
Good night.